Hello, everybody. Thank you for jumping into this really quick live stream. I decided to go live and basically chat with you guys about a couple of things. I want to talk about setting goals, I want to talk about habits, and basically the idea of tackling big projects. So, if you're joining me live right now, please let me know that you're here. I'm actually streaming this outside from my phone. So also, if you're joining, let me know if you can hear me okay, and if the quality of the connection is good enough for me to actually continue the live stream. So you might hear some birds in the background, which I think is nice. It's probably about 65 degrees here in New York today, and I got to go for a run this morning, got to do some homeschooling, and took care of a lot of work emails. Finally, at inbox zero, and it feels amazing. As a reward, I decided to go live and talk about goals because that's something that I've been thinking about for a while now. The idea of setting goals and actually accomplishing them. Right now, my personal big goal, I actually have several, but I think the one that looks like it's the most intimidating right now is the book slash course that I'm working on, which is Color for Data Storytelling and Data Visualization, and basically how color theory, color psychology, and all of that plays into visualizing data and communicating that data to those that need to take action with it. So, before I get into things any further, I just want to make sure. Okay, Purva, hi, you're here. Good to see you as well, Purva. Thanks so much for joining. That confirms that things are working. So, very excited to see that. I'm in my backyard right now. And it's actually so nice out. So, anyways, I'll focus on the goals. But if anyone has any questions or comments, I definitely see them coming in. Even though I'm on my phone, I could still see them popping up. So definitely um, ask questions as they come up, or feel free to leave comments, and I'll definitely address those as they come in. So tackling that goal, it's been on my mind for a while now. My biggest first step is I need to put together a book proposal for that, and it's been taking me a while. I have very little patience for myself and things that I want to accomplish. So goals that take me further out than a couple of weeks are already big in my opinion, because that means they'll have to have my focus for an extended period of time, which for me is difficult to focus on just one thing. That's why I have the dedicated media partnerships company. I've got the dedicated conference, the dedicated academy where we're building over 20 different courses over the next few months. A lot of moving pieces. But I'll get back to talking about the book because it's something that I'm really passionate about, making sure that people can actually use color properly and consider accessibility, color blindness, and how your use of color can actually detract the audience's attention, or focus your audience's attention in a specific way. And the way I'm trying to tackle this is spending an hour a day on the project. Now, an hour doesn't seem like much because, in my mind, the best case scenario is okay, I'm going to sit down for 20 hours, get this thing done, because it's like a big math problem, right? When you step away, you think that you forget what you've been working on, but it's definitely not the case. I think hour or 2 hours a day is a good chunk of time for you to really give it your full focus, and those hours add up, right? So if I do this for 30 days, 40 days, that's an hour each day. That definitely adds up. And the amount of work you get to accomplish is so much more than if I were to just try to do it all at once. Because you come to the project with renewed energy and excitement, especially if the topic that you're working on or the project you're working on is really exciting for you, like it is for me. So when I get to work on my project, I get to work on my project. It's not like, oh, I have to work on this project. So chunking has been a really, really effective strategy for me, because it allows me that kind of reward system of, okay, now project time, let's get to it. Um, it might not work for everybody, and I understand that, but it has been working for me. The other aspect is habits, making a good habit of doing that thing that you have to do as part of another habit. So An example is running, right? Some people want to take up running and they're like, oh, I never have time, or I forget, or it's not priority. If it's something that you truly want to do, linking it with another action that you do every day can sometimes help you. So for me, running is actually linked very strongly with brushing my teeth. I think I've programmed myself unintentionally that once I brush my teeth, I want to run. Because I have this thing where I have to brush my teeth before running. I have no idea why, but it's something that tends to work. So if I'm not particularly in the mood for running, I can start that process by brushing my teeth, putting on the running clothes, and then it's kind of like, okay, we're doing it. Take a few steps. Before you know it, you've run a couple of miles and you're, really into it. Checking in some comments. Hello, Tushar. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about habits, big projects, and goals. So if you've got questions that you think I can answer on those topics, feel free to ask. So I actually started a new audiobook this morning on my run. It's called Peak. It's all about peak performance and how we can achieve that state of peak performance. And it's very interesting because the author goes into something called deliberate practice, right? Most of you might have already heard about the concept of deliberate practice, but essentially he goes on to say that just because we're doing something doesn't mean we're getting better at it, right? So there have been studies that say once you've done something for 10,000 hours, you become an expert. He says that that's not necessarily the case. It all depends on the value and kind of the effort you've put into those 10,000 hours. Essentially, he gives the example of somebody playing a musical instrument, let's say guitar, right, as an example. That's not his example, but I like the guitar and I'm trying to learn it, so I'll use that example. And his student or a student goes to the teacher and says, how did I fail my music test? I practiced like 20 times yesterday. And so the teacher asks, okay, how many times did you practice that you got it right? And the student's like, oh, I think I got it right once or twice, right, out of 20 practice sessions. And that lies in that's where the problem lies, because all those other extra 18 sessions or so are pretty much useless, because if you're not giving it your all and your full concentrated attention, you're not necessarily making any positive practice. You're essentially wasting time and logging hours, which for something like running could probably be good. And unless you're using terrible running form, then it's probably going to work against you, or you can hurt yourself. It's all about deliberate practice. So you're fully focused, your attention is fully there, you're fully present, and you're very much in tune with doing things the right way, in the right form. Another aspect he talks about is getting feedback, right? So how do you know you're doing it right? Having somebody sit next to you and tell you missed a note, or hey, you messed up here, or you were playing with your phone while you were supposed to be reading this book during this time, so you can't really count that. It's having that accountability where you can actually know if you've done it the right way or not. Just going to quickly look at comments. Tushar from YouTube was reading Atomic Habits the other day and it was good. Yes, I actually read that book and then I referred to that book again because I really, really love Atomic Habits. And that's where I picked up the whole concept of chunking your one habit, lumping it in with another habit, or misplacing habits, where if you have a bad habit, trying to swap that out for a good one. I'm going to go ahead and quickly look at a question here from Purva. But bringing them into reality needs actions. What are your tips for people who struggle with taking actions? Now, it's hard for me to address this because that's one thing I don't have an issue with, is taking action. I can actually say that this is probably one of my weaknesses. I think very, very little before I take action. I plan very little. And I think it's something that I learned early on, that if you want to accomplish something, do it. Don't read about it too much. Don't interview people too much. Don't study it too much. Just actually start doing whatever that thing is. So I'll give you an example. My conference, my dedicated conference last October was my first ever event. It took me less than 2 months to go from thinking I want to create a conference to actually running a full-on conference. And the way that happened was I'm like, okay, what does a conference need? Okay, we need speakers and we need people to register for the event. Okay, great. So I reached out to people, got a few speakers, and announced the event online. I basically spent probably 20 minutes putting together a WordPress landing page, and simply got started. I think if you're excited enough about something, the simple act of making small progress towards whatever that goal is going to have a snowball effect, right? You're just going to keep going and you're going to continue building upon it. So for me, going back to that conference example, what happened was people got excited and they started signing up. Then more people wanted to speak at the event. That attracted sponsors, which was great because that allowed me to get things like dedicated t-shirts for the speakers, and I had a photo booth that I had to pay for, so that really helped in that regard. And it actually ended up being a real conference. What really started as an experiment ended up now an ongoing event where we have our third conference planned for May 18th and 19th, hosted on LinkedIn Live. So very, very excited about how things went there. But I think most people would generally do some research, right? They'd sit back, observe other events, and think about how do I do this, or where do I find a platform, and spend a couple months just researching who are the best speakers, how do I get registrants. When you actually just start doing it, it's easier for you to just kind of learn as you go. Now I understand this might not apply to everything, so Purva, if you've got an actual example, I can try to talk through that example and how I would approach it in terms of taking action. But the other quick tip I'll give you is getting started for 10 minutes, right? Do something for 10 minutes, whether it's running, whether it's reading a book, working on some project, writing code, taking a course, all these things that when we sign up for things, like we're so excited and we want to be those people that accomplish these goals. But what happens is life gets in the way, we maybe lose that excitement, and we no longer take action. Now, my suggestion is take 10 minutes of your day and just start doing something on whatever that project is. Chances are you're going to go on for more than 10 minutes because that little bit of progress is going to fuel the excitement to continue working on things. Hope I answered the question. It's a comment from Tushar. If you've got that burning desire to do things, then it gets easier to overcome the hurdles and move forward. Yeah, absolutely. And what's I read this, probably somebody posted on Facebook, that really changed my life a couple years ago. And she basically said, when you're scrolling through social media, and let's say there's a food recipe that you want to try out that you think your family will absolutely love. What do we usually do in that situation? We save the recipe, we take a screenshot, which we never look at, we send it to ourselves, which we ignore, sometimes print it out, great. But unless we actually go to the store, get the ingredients, and start doing that recipe right away, or whatever that thing was that inspired you, chances are you're not going to go through with it because that's just one more thing on your list now in your mind of like, oh yeah, I want to do this. So the idea here is to take immediate action, right? Once inspiration hits, do it. If you have a blog article that you've been meaning to write, leave the LinkedIn Live session right now, or whatever, however you join, go write that article, right? As long as it's in your mind, I say just go ahead and do it. Purva says that's a very good tip. Made sense. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Let me think. I think I've covered off big projects. Well, the big projects part of things, the way I'm approaching that big project is through chunking it into different pieces. So for me, the example of the big project was the book on color for data storytelling. The way I'm approaching it is part one was market research, which I basically posted a few polls and questions on LinkedIn. And for the most part, the responses have been really positive in terms of people wanting this out there, this type of content. So that was enough for me to get motivated, because a few hundred comments saying, yay, you should do it, is really, it goes a long way. For me, especially knowing that this is something that people would actually read and use in their day-to-day. Second part now is writing that book proposal in case I decide to work with a publisher, which I am leaning heavily towards maybe, working with a publisher versus self-publishing the book this time. And then after that, the project gets chunked into each chapter, right? So let's say I have 8 or 10 chapters in the book. I'll set aside a couple of weeks for each chapter to basically chunk that work into smaller projects where I'm not intimidated and overwhelmed by, oh my God, I have to write, hundreds of pages for this book. That's really, really scary. So, all right, at this point, I want to thank everybody for hopping on into this unplanned, non scheduled live session. Before I hop, I just see that Chinwei said she's interested to see the book as well. Thank you so much. The more I read about color, honestly, the more excited I become. There's so many cool things that I'll be posting as I learn them over the next few weeks as I'm developing the table of contents and the book proposal and all of that, which is actually a much bigger undertaking than I thought it is. That book proposal. I've also been speaking to many authors who've written data books, data visualization books, some really amazing people that are really guiding me in a really positive way in terms of how to work with publishers and book proposal ideas and all that. So really, really thankful for the data community and for you guys. Thank you for joining the session. Hope you have a great afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you might be. Thank you again for joining. Bye.